I had to be fired from here so that I can go and start my business. It was God's way of pushing me. When something happens in your life, you can come up with a positive or a negative story about it. If I was married and you told me a story about my wife that made me leave my wife, and then I later found out that it wasn't true, I would have to come and find you, and at the very least, you would have to explain to me why you told me the story that you told me. I'm saying this to explain something to you. Some of us, the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves affect the way that we live. It affects your confidence. It affects how you see yourself. It affects what you believe about yourself. Many of the things that you claim that you cannot do are just simply the result of a story that you told yourself. Some of you don't believe in yourself because of a story that you told yourself. Some of you have given up even on marriages simply because of a story that you told yourself, or given up on an opportunity that was right in front of you simply because of a story that you told yourself. What story do you tell yourself about yourself? What stories do you tell yourself about the circumstances, the situations that you encounter every now and then in your life? Some of you are telling yourself stories that have sabotaged you time and time again. There was no need for you to pass on that opportunity, but you told yourself that you couldn't. There was no need for you to walk away, but you told yourself that it was over. You told yourself a story and it directed your path. What story have you been telling yourself? This is what determines your belief system. In every situation, there is a positive and a negative. And you can look on either side and come up with a story. When something happens in your life, you can come up with a positive or a negative story about it. I'll give you an example. Many of you watching this have been retrenched before. You've been laid off before. You've been released from a job. And when it happened, there are some people who told themselves a story that went something like, I had to be fired from here so that I can go and start my business. I had to be fired from here. It was God's way of pushing me to go and upskill, to go and improve myself so I can find a better job. And then you went on and followed that exact same path. And some of you, when it happened, you told yourself a story that said, it's over. You told yourself a story that said, and unemployment is at a high rate right now and it will be difficult for me to ever get another job. Whatever story you told yourself is the one that determined how you got to where you are right now. What story have you been telling yourself about yourself and about your circumstances? In the book of Mark chapter 5, there's a story that shows us a picture of this with Jesus and a man called Jairus. Jairus shows up to Jesus and says, my little girl is sick. She's not well and I need help. Would you come to my house, lay your hand on her and heal her? And on the way to Jairus' house, there's an interruption and Jesus ends up taking longer than he was supposed to get to Jairus' house. And as they were in the middle of their journey, some messengers arrived from the house of Jairus to say to Jairus himself, your daughter's dead. There's no need for you to bother Jesus anymore. In other words, your daughter is dead. There's no need for you to keep on believing that your daughter can live anymore. There's no need for you to keep on believing that your daughter will be healed anymore. That's the story right now. That's the current reality. That is the story that he's been given. And immediately when Jesus overhears this, he doesn't address the people who are telling the story, but he addresses Jairus himself. He says, Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe. Don't be afraid, just believe. They make their way over to Jairus' house, and when they get there, everyone is crying, there is commotion, there is wailing, because a little girl is gone. And when this happens, Jesus arrives at the scene and says, why is everyone crying? The girl is not dead, she's only sleeping. And everyone laughs at him because it seems as though he is clueless. But now here's another story. Now there are two stories. There's one story that says the girl is dead, and there's another story that says she's only asleep. And it seems as though the difference here is in interpretation, because guess what? A person who is sleeping and a person who is dead look exactly the same to the eye. If I'm looking at you from a distance, as long as your eyes are closed, I couldn't tell whether you are dead or whether you were sleeping. And so it's left to interpretation. I can look at you and say, she's asleep. Or I can assume that she's dead. And that's exactly what happened in the story. And I want you to think about this in terms of your own life, in terms of your own situations, how you have a tendency of looking at something that could be asleep or could be dead, and you make up your story right there and there. You look at a relationship that is struggling, or you look at a career that is struggling, or you look at a business that is struggling, and you make up your mind right there and then, just because it looks like it could be asleep or dead. And your mindset will determine which one you end up believing. It's over. The little girl is dead. And so let's start singing hymns. Let's start crying. Let's start mourning. And Jesus arrives and says, the girl is not dead. She's only asleep. Puts everyone out. Very interesting story. Puts everyone out. Goes in with the father and the mother of the girl, lays a hand on her, and says, little girl, get up. Little girl, get up. In other words, wake up. And the only reason he can say this is because he's already said that she's only asleep. You don't do such a thing if you believe that it's over. Your reaction, the next step, the next move that you're going to make is determined by what you believe about your current situation. See, I could be in a relationship, and if my lady said to me, sent me a text or called me and said, it's over, I could believe her right there and then and say, you know what, I guess that's just it. Or I could say, I think she's just in a bad space. Get into the car, travel to wherever she is, bring some flowers and say, it's not over. We're going to work this out. We're going to figure it out. Because I told myself a story that says it is not over. What story are you telling yourself? The business that's currently struggling, your next move will be determined by what you think about it. Do you think it's over? Do you think there's no way that you can make it work anymore? What's your thinking? What story have you been telling yourself? Remember, there is no situation that is all bad. There is no situation that is all negative. You can make up your own story. They can fire you today and you make up a story telling yourself, I guess this is an opportunity for me to go and start that business I've been thinking about. I just needed the push. A relationship can end with someone who you thought you would be with for the rest of your life, and you would say, I guess this was exactly what I needed, because if I stayed with her, I might have ended up in divorce. And I'm so glad it happened now. I tell myself that story, and all of a sudden I feel better. All of a sudden I see it differently, right? A business could be struggling right now, and you say, I guess this is the opportunity that I needed to upskill, to learn how to sell, to go and network, or come up with whatever story you want to come up with. You need to come up with a good story that's going to allow you to act differently. Because guess what? The truth is, the negative story that you're making up, or that you're telling yourself, you came up with it. Whatever story you're telling yourself, you made it up. You can make up a story saying that all men are dogs and I will just never find someone again. You made that up. You can make up a story saying right now it's so hard to find employment. For someone like me, it will be even more difficult. You made that up. You can come up with whatever story you want to come up with, and that will determine your next move. So what are you doing next? And I'm telling you now, it's determined by the story you've told yourself.
When you change your thoughts, you change your life. This is Thoughts That Count with Poloko.